Hello and welcome to our channel. It is Sanan and I who will be discussing the soccer news again. And this time around, the news is mostly focused upon the international affairs that happened over the week. But we'll also be discussing the Premier League, which, in my opinion, is the best league in the world. Some people say it's La Liga, but there are debates to it. So, Sanan, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's a tough time in the international break for a lot of football fans, but I'm surviving. How about you?
Yeah, I'm doing good because I mostly support England in the international affairs. So yeah, they have pretty easy fixtures. Although it's the start of a new era under Thomas Tuchel, but it seems they're off to a winning start, and they face I believe Latvia later on today.
Yeah, they do. I think when I was a kid, I used to in the World Cup support England because my favorite team's Arsenal, and it kind of worked. But I remember the first World Cup I watched, they lost that game against Germany. You remember with the controversy with the Lampard goal, I think,
Yeah,
and
I think the
it was
goal that
over the
went in.
line. Yeah, and that's how they started with the goal line technology. That like after that event, then that's when it got like really they got serious about implementing that. But yeah, I watched a couple of the games. I think my favorite game was probably so far the Spain-Netherlands game. I don't know, the combination of Williams and Yamal on the break was great. Like I think they put them up 2-1 at one point with like Yamal putting through Williams to give it to Orizabal, if I'm saying his name correctly, hopefully. But very like interesting game. It's a shame for you. I mean, Van Dijk lost another out of another tournament.
He's now out of three competitions, so the only ones left is the Premier League. But it's been a really heartbreaking, or what should I call it, week for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's won a lot in his career. I think he'll be able to get past it pretty easily. But yeah, like if you're out with your country and then, out of the Champions League and the losing a final, it's been a tough couple of weeks to be a Liverpool fan, but to be honest, I think in the long run they're gonna be fine. The league looks like it's pretty wrapped up now. But one other thing we should quickly mention about the international break is as proud Canadians, the Canada beat the US
We
2-1,
Yeah,
which
we've beaten, and I was seeing these comments like people were recommending that there's always space for the 11th province in this North American country. So yes, it was a massive win
yeah.
for them. Jonathan David, who was like very silent. I went to I went to a watch party when Mexico played Canada. But that match was Canada couldn't get like in the final third, they weren't impressive at all, and Jonathan David was almost like he couldn't be seen in the entire match. But in this match against the US, and US is ranked pretty much better than Canada. Canada's 31st, US is 16th in FIFA's rankings, but it was a really impressive win from Canada as we head towards the next World Cup, which is in 2026. But for Mexico themselves, they were the winners of the league of the trophy. Raul Jimenez, what a guy! Like his performances, we all remember from Wolves. Now he's at Fulham, but he scored a brace in the semi-final against Canada, and now he scored a brace against Panama, who no one expected to defeat US in the semi-finals did. And but yeah, overall great win for Canada. They get a winner's medal.
Yeah, I mean, not to get too political, but the US is taking a lot of L's from the countries that they have conflict with right
Yeah.
now,
Also, the
which is
ice
very
hockey match that
interesting.
we were talking about.
Yeah, that was a huge one. I was watching that live with a bunch of people, and everyone was going, crazy for that one. But yeah, back to Europe, and the Premier League. As we said earlier, I think, the title is a foregone conclusion. Even though I think Liverpool aren't in great form right now, I don't see a world where they drop 12 points. And Arsenal themselves are not going to win all of their games remaining. Even as an Arsenal fan, I'm not that delusional.
Yep.
I might be delusional enough to predict us to beat Real Madrid, but not delusional enough for this, unfortunately. Um,
And it also seems like Arsenal have faced, I think, some fresh injuries with, I think, Calafiori, although he wasn't playing, but it's still he was like the backup option to Lewis Kelly, who's scored a goal for England. I think that was a debut goal for him. But I've heard news about Gabriel as well. There was some sort of thing that happened. I'm not sure what's the extent of his injury, but on the international duty, and we all know the forward issue with Arsenal of how
Yeah.
Jesus is injured, and also their the other guy, I just forgot his name.
Saka, Havertz.
Yeah, Havertz. Sorry, how did I
Yeah.
forget Havertz? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a tough one because even though Calafiori wasn't starting, he provided us a lot of like a very good attacking option off the bench, which is very funny. We sign a left center back to play left back, and he becomes one of our best attacking options off the bench. Um, but yeah, hopefully it's not too serious, particularly the Gabriel one, because I don't know. In my opinion, if you're looking at Arsenal player of the season so far this year, it's either Gabriel or David Raya. Since Saka's been injured for so long, it has to really just be one of them two. Rice also has a shout in there, but he is very important. As much as everyone praises Saliba, I think Gabriel has been the better of the two this year. And if he were to be injured as well as Calafiori, who's theoretically the backup left back and backup left center back, we'd be in a bit of trouble. We might have to play Kivior, which is obviously might not be ideal. But on better Arsenal news, I think Saka is predicted to be back after the international break, and Martinelli's already, got some minutes under his belt. So, hopefully everything will be okay. But yeah,
And
I
you just
think
said
the
Kivior. I recall Kivior played against Liverpool, I think, in one of the matches, because I think so. Either one of your defenders was injured, because I can recall he played against Liverpool in the Premier League this season.
Yeah, I think he came off the bench in the 2-2 draw because Gabriel and Timber had to come off injured during the match. So he came onto the pitch. Sadly, we were winning 2-1, and after he came on, we conceded. But I don't think it was his fault. I think he's a solid player. I think he's certainly very good, but Arsenal have way too many left-sided defenders at this point, especially with the emergence of Lewis Kelly. But I think in terms of the league as a whole, I think the top two is quite set. Unless Arsenal drop off a little bit, they might fall to third. Because Forest are only 4 points off. But with Saka coming back, I don't really see us, dropping to Forest. I don't see us closing the gap much to Liverpool, but I also don't see us dropping out of second. But the top four race is very, very interesting. There are a lot of teams that could make it. And on top of that, in terms of Champions League football, I'm pretty sure I think the Premier League might be getting the fifth Champions League spot this year because of the coefficients and the performance of their teams in Europe. So that's a very interesting development. I think you can go down like very deep in the table to the teams fighting for fourth. I'd say all the way up to probably Bournemouth in 10th have a shot at fourth place or fifth place, with Chelsea being on 49 and City being on 48. Um, it's probably the closest top four race we've had in a very long time, and it's far more interesting than the title race, unfortunately.
Yeah,
But
it just looks like it's like if like one of the teams placed from like fourth to fifth to the 10th, if they just lose a match, it could result in them going from like fourth to fifth straight to like eighth or ninth.
yeah,
So it's like a really close call this time. I think Bournemouth has like 44 points, and the team placed at number six is Newcastle United. They're 47. So it's just a point difference, and and Bournemouth also has the better goal difference as well. So if Newcastle drop any point and Bournemouth win their match, that could result in them climbing the table drastically.
yeah, and that's a tough thing with the points tallies this close. Like if you're a team like Aston Villa with negative goal difference, you're probably at a big disadvantage when it comes down to the end of the season, whether that be just for a Europa League place in the end of it, right? But yeah, I think what's interesting is I thought after the January window, City seemed like they were having a bit of a resurgence, but in recent weeks they started dropping points again. And honestly, I did not see that coming. I thought they would be after Chelsea's recent form, I thought they'd be over them, but like right now it's really wide open. I think Forest are safe. they're like almost 6 points clear of City at this point, and they're in good form. They don't have many injuries. But when you look further down the table, it's really hard to call because Brighton are super inconsistent. Bournemouth the same. One or two injuries there could really derail their challenge. Villa have been inconsistent. Chelsea have. I think that's just really the tale of the teams from fourth to tenth. They've all just been very inconsistent. So if I was forced to make a prediction, I just think Chelsea, like on individual talent, and I mean this has been the case for a long time, but I think having a player like Palmer, even though he's in bad form, I think that will be the difference in some of these games towards the end of the season. And, while, there are other teams that, can compete, I don't, I think Liverpool have proved this year that amongst all else, if you can attack and continually attack and consistently create chances and score goals, then you're going to be competitive. And I think, like teams like maybe Brighton, Chelsea, possibly City, I'd say are maybe even Bournemouth, but I think they're 5 points back, which might be tough. I think those are the teams I'm looking at as the main challengers for those fourth and fifth spots.
Yeah. And let's not forget Fulham as well. They're owned by a Pakistani businessman, Pakistani American businessman, because he left Pakistan when he was 16. But yeah, they also have shouts for the top five position. They also have the informed Raul Jimenez in their team. He's their main striker. So yeah, if I start to talk about like the premium club, the number one in the table, Liverpool. So I'm seeing this thing that I was seeing the statistics of how reliant Liverpool has been on Salah. Like Salah has scored over 60% of the goals for them this season. And if we just talk about the Premier League, so I believe it's Cody Gakpo and Luis Diaz who are like the top scorers, except for Salah. In the Liverpool squad, I believe Luis Diaz has scored 9 Premier League goals, while
Mm,
Gakpo has scored 8. So they're not even into double digits right now, while Salah
mm.
has surpassed more than 20 goals consistently, while also keeping in mind that his contract is ending. So we're not sure if he'll be there next season. So Liverpool would also want a replacement in case if he doesn't sign a contract extension. So I was recalling the times when Firmino, Mane, and Salah used to play together, and Firmino was criticized that he's not scoring the goals, but he was the reason why Klopp said always that Mane and Salah score all the goals because he comes down, and then Salah and Mane are assisted by Robertson and Trent with their crosses, their deliveries, and Mane. These two particular seasons that I recall, the 1920 season and the 2021 season. In the 1920 season, I believe Salah and Mane they both got the Golden Boot, where they both scored 22 goals each, and in the next season, I believe Mane scored probably like a goal or two less, but it was they they weren't reliant on just one player. Liverpool compared to this season, now they're heavily reliant on Salah, who scored like almost 65% of their goals, and it seems to be yes, if you win the Premier League this season, as you said, highly likely with the 12 points ahead of Arsenal, they should win the Premier League, but it's something to think about for the next season in case Salah leaves the club. So who's the one who's going to replace him? There have been names like Brian Mbumo or players from other leagues, but Salah also came from Roma, and he wasn't this a success story at Chelsea when he played under Mourinho, but he proved himself. But it's also a thing to ponder for Liverpool, like with such a player, why aren't they making sure that he gets a contract extension when you're seeing this season that how reliant the whole club is on this just one particular player.
Yeah, I think Liverpool over the years have been a bit conservative when it comes to contract extensions. They were always dragging them out, trying to get the best deal possible. And while that can save money for the club, it puts a lot of uncertainty into your future plans and makes it difficult for your manager or the club to really, plan the future of the attack. And speaking of the other attackers, like Liverpool, had that recent fall off. But if we actually talk about the attackers' form in 2025. I had this, I actually saw the stat earlier and I wanted to pull it up for this. Like if we talk about in 2025, the stats of some Liverpool attackers, Jota has 0 goals in 10 games, Nunez has 1 goal in 13 games, and Diaz has 1 goal in 18 games, compared to Salah's 12 in 17, right? So it's those are like, key attackers. Those were expensive players. Those are supposed to be the players that are going to be the future of this Liverpool attack once, Salah eventually leaves, whether it's this year, next year. Um, so when you see stuff like that, it is worrying because when you're so reliant on one player, offensively in terms of like, the end product, it can be like very scary after he leaves because even if you spend a lot of money and replace him with a good, like a great player, the amount that player has to do is very daunting. No matter how good the player is, Salah's been here for 6, 7 years. Like he's very embedded in the system. And if you consistently cannot get output out of your other attackers, it doesn't bode well for whoever's going to come in to replace him. Even if they're given that same freedom and space, that type of expectation is, it might have that effect like what happened to Barcelona after, Messi left, right? Spent a lot of money to replace him, but at the end of the day, that level of output is, almost inhuman. So how do you replace something like that? But I do think there are currently a lot of great right wing options in the world. I think it's one of the more stacked positions, these days. In terms of who Liverpool can actually get, that's another, discussion because I doubt Dembele is going to be for sale. Um, Saka is obviously not going to be for sale.
Oh,
Maybe
sorry.
Rodrigo, but what I'm seeing now is that he seems like he's a preferred option in big games on that right flank. So is he going to leave? So it might be a case, as has been in the past with Liverpool, where they look to instead sign, an up and comer. Because at the time Salah was, I think, 25, 26, and he wasn't exactly one of the best wingers in the world when he was signed with Liverpool, neither was Mane. So it might be the case for Liverpool instead try and look towards some younger players. And in that case, there are some great options. I mean, Barcolas, it's sometimes on the bench for PSG. I really like him. He could be a great option. Um, but yeah, like for Liverpool, it's going to be very interesting because, like as you said, Robertson and Trent were also very key to the way their attack functioned with those inside forwards and the striker going back a bit. But Robertson is aged out, of his prime, and Trent is almost, it's looking like he's almost very likely to leave. So there's going to be a major overhaul required of this Liverpool side in the summer, and even if they do win the Premier League this season, which I'm 99% sure that they will. Next year is going to be very uncertain because, it's also going to be the second year of Slot. Are people going to be adapted to him at this point? Because, it is his first year. Now teams might be starting to figure him out a little bit more. So it's going to be a big, big, big test for Arne Slot next year of how he can adapt, probably a big turnover in players, and also adapt to, other managers being more familiar with his play style. And, I think I think it's going to be very interesting. I think they're going to be one of the most interesting teams next season to see how they react to all this change. Because, in recent years, in the past 10, 15 years, big change in football clubs has all usually been associated with, downturns, especially in these big clubs. We saw it when Wenger left, we saw it when Sir Alex left. Now, obviously, Klopp has left and they're likely winning the league, but what's going to happen, next year when when his squad that, Klopp built starts to, you know, be replaced?
Oh, yes. And it's also a thing where Robertson has been continuously challenged, and with Trent himself saying in an interview that he wants to win more trophies. So, with all these things in mind, Liverpool have been dragging the case, which has been the thing with them in terms of contracts. Their captain Virgil van Dijk, they haven't made sure if he's staying for the next season or not. Then there's Salah. Uh, Even in the midfield, if we talk to people or if we see on social media, Ryan Gravenberg has been a revelation. No one thought that he'll play this well, but with Alexis McAllister Arne Slot likes to play the 4-2-3-1. So there's also calls of bringing in a new midfielder as well. But with all these settled players going outside, Van Dijk's, the Salahs, it'll be it'll be a really busy transfer window, I believe, in the summer with like you're not just replacing the players who've been there for like 5-7 years, but you also need to bring in new players to help your midfield, to help your fullbacks.
Yeah, I think Liverpool definitely need like some upgrades, especially at left back. Robertson was a great player, but I think he's past his prime. And yeah, your midfield, while it, when everyone is fit, is very good. We saw against PSG what can happen, when Gravenberch, McAllister, Szoboszlai have to play like every game, right? So more depth is probably needed. Maybe a different profile, like a kind of player who's, can play either, a bit deeper. Um, at least to cover Gravenberch, or maybe as an option to play with Gravenberch, maybe pushing him further forward. Um, but yeah, I think Liverpool need beyond replacing, some of these great players, they need some reinforcements to their current squad. Yeah, so I mean, if we
There,
move on, oh, go ahead.
there is this guy named Joshua Kimmich who got 2 assists and a goal for Germany in the Nations League, but unfortunately he just signed a contract extension with Bayern Munich, so he's now there till 2029. So yeah, we
I
live
was
to
sad
fight
about
another
that
day.
too. I was sad he would have been perfect at Arsenal too. But yeah, like a lot of clubs are having a lot of turnover in the summer, and Arsenal is one of them. Similar to Liverpool, we have Jorginho, Partey out of contract, Zinchenko and Tierney are also likely leaving. Um, so there's going to be a lot of turnover in multiple positions. I think beyond that, a new striker is kind of a given that that's going to happen. And probably one more attacking-minded player. So, there's going to be, a holding midfielder likely, and a striker, a winger, and possibly a defender, given that Zinchenko and Tierney are leaving. But in my opinion, we have a lot of defenders. But in more depth, I'm not going to complain, right? But um, especially with the way our academy is rolling, I'd say I'd like us to not over recruit in the summer. Lewis Kelly and Waneri, I want them to be mainstay fixtures of the first team squad even next year. Even if they're not starting every game, I want them to be, getting some serious minutes because I think developing that type of talent is just, it saves the club so much money, like, and it allows us to improve in other positions that we wouldn't have. And if you look at Barcelona, right, like right now, how they're getting, bailed out by their academy in their time of financial struggle, it's you can just see how much that's helping them. I mean, they're currently one of the best teams in Europe, right? They're challenging for the Champions League and La Liga at the same time. And if you were to say this, 2 years ago, people would be fairly surprised. But Kuba, every year they have someone coming through, and it's Kubarsi, before that Yamal, before that Gavi, Pedri. There's always someone coming there that's and now that Arsenal are starting to not on that level, but do something similar, but in England, it's gonna be interesting to see now how they invest because Arteta, before this year wasn't exactly the most trusting of young talent. There was criticisms for him, and we saw a number of Arsenal youngsters, Aiden Heaven, Chido Martin, Omari Hutchinson to Chelsea, leave because they didn't think they'd be able to get that opportunity, at the Emirates. But now with Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly, it could be signal a great future for that. In terms of recruitment, I know the fans are very expectant of a big outlay in the summer. But above that, I hope that we cover what should have been covered already this season, which is proper attacking depth. Because they've aimed and they have effectively covered the defense and the midfield. But lacking an attack means that you can't win a game if you don't score. And we've proven that without certain players we can't score. And that's a big, big issue. And I think the biggest thing for next year for me personally is I want to see one, obviously us recruit well, but I want to see some players return to their previous form, like Martin Odegaard. I think he's had an all right season. He was injured for a couple months, but he is the type of player that can, control a game, like someone like Pedri or, someone like Luka Modric. Um, and we haven't seen that, enough this year. He, compared to previous seasons, so I hope he does come back. But yeah, I think next year, in comparison to Liverpool, I think there'll be less change at Arsenal. So, I think they'll be competitive again next year, and without any injuries, and maybe not any questionable red cards, we might have a chance again to compete for the title.
Yep. And in these situations, we've seen that like Manchester City, although like 99% of us would agree with the abundance of funds that they have, they can do this, but they're always a step ahead. Like they saw the gap that they saw with the departure of Julian Alvarez. That seems to be, although it's new days for him or Omar Marmoush, but it feels like with his goal scoring spree and with like the quantity of goals he's doing, it seems like if he's not a exact replacement of Alvarez, but at least he's giving the goal scoring options or the opportunities to Haaland, which were there when Alvarez was playing. And secondly, they saw this gap in the defense in the second in the center back position, so they got Husanov. Although he's made a few mistakes and he's I believe 19 or maybe 20, I believe. So he's a lot inexperienced in that manner, but they're building towards something and they're already onto it. They saw the winter transfer window and they didn't wait for the summer transfer window to come to buy all these players. They just saw that they're trailing behind, and Pep, I think he said like maybe 2 months back or something when he had gotten to know that he's not winning the league anymore, and so his goal was finishing up in the top four, which is still a goal because it's not guaranteed for them that they'll finish in the top four with the form that they're in. But always like in terms of transfers, we know they're a step ahead, especially if we compared that to Liverpool, who just drag things on. So they've made these changes and now they're set for the next season. And even if we talk about the summer window, they'll be making some more changes to bring in reinforcements or also to replace the players who will be going. KDB, the best playmaker in the last decade, if you talk about within the Premier League. I think he'll be out of contract, and it's not sure if he'll sign a contract extension, although it's highly likely that he will. But there's also been news from the MLS. I think the director or the co-director or someone of San Diego FC was interviewed and asked. So he did accept that he had talked to KDB. Like these two people had talks of KDB wanting to come to San Diego because he goes to San Diego almost every year to for vacations, but it hasn't been agreed that KDB would want to play in the MLS. But there's also other players. There was news of Akanji also being transferred out, and with these players who are like almost in their 30s, uh, it's interesting how they'll be sold out in the summer, and then also they'll have to find replacements for these players.
So yeah, I mean, Marmoush was a great signing. It's very interesting that dynamic he's created now with Haaland because previously, if you had just Haaland by himself up top, the defense or the two center backs could really focus on him without actually losing much in terms of, making the team vulnerable. But now when you have Marmoush with his, unbelievable pace and Haaland with his physicality and pace, if you focus on Haaland, which you have to do to stop him from scoring, Marmoush is open. And, vice versa, if you do it on Marmoush, Haaland's open. So you have two like physical monsters now in your attack. And when Alvarez was there, it was similar in the sense that you couldn't leave Alvarez alone because of his, he's a great, like unbelievable ball striker. We saw that in the Champions League game against Madrid with his long range goal. Like it was the same thing. And Marmoush is, you're right in the sense that he is replacing, Alvarez's impact and, his ability to draw defenders away from Erling Haaland, which, now that that's happening, City look better in attack. And that's why I was surprised that now they're not, doing better than they are. But yeah, like it's a common theme across a lot of the big teams that there's a lot of change coming this year. And I think we're going to see a lot of spending. But the interesting point is, like I think we're kind of past the stage where transfer fees are going up and up and up. I think in recent years they've actually been coming down. Like I don't think we're gonna see like many more. Like I think £100 million transfer is gonna be much rarer these days. The post Neymar inflation is finally stopping. And so it's going to be interesting the types of deals that clubs like City are going to make to replace players like Akanji, because when you think Akanji was a cheap player, he only cost them, I think 15 million euros or pounds. And making those types of deals in this day and age might get you a better quality of player or maybe a younger one, right? So it's going to be interesting this transfer window as to how clubs approach it when it comes to, not the big deals and the pricing of these moves, because I do think that the inflation is stopping. Now, if you look at some other clubs that have done really well this year, I think a couple of clubs are, because of this big shift in the big clubs where now they're all preparing for big windows, you're going to see a lot of clubs right now, that have a lot of talent that are starting to do better, kind of get picked apart. And that, like, when you look at Bournemouth, for example, Dean Huijsen, who's been, touted everywhere as one, the next best thing. He's likely, going to get picked off by a big club. Same thing with Milos Kerkez at left back. Liverpool might sign him. He's up there when, was one of the best performing left backs in the league. Solanke already got picked off from them by Tottenham. And, they have Justin Kluivert, then they have a lot of
Semenyo as
players.
well.
Yeah, and then you go to Brighton, who have a history of doing this, bringing in young talent and then selling them for astronomical fees. There's a number of players there that could be on the move, including, Mitoma, Minta. I know Ferguson's at West Ham that might be made permanent. Like they still have like Baleba, so they have an abundance of talent there. So, in these clubs where you don't have the commercial revenue of these top six clubs, like they're gonna be financially pressured to sell these players at these valuations, because these clubs are gonna be very, very aggressive in the next window. I mean, we saw how Man City was very aggressive in January. I think Liverpool, Arsenal, possibly United, but United I'm unsure about after the whole Ratcliffe stuff. I have no clue what they're gonna do. Chelsea always spends money, so I'm sure they're gonna find a way to spend another 200 million. And I think given that Arsenal have had a lot of success and Liverpool as well, from actually picking players off from, fellow Premier League clubs, I do think the big clubs this year are going to look more domestically for their recruiting. Like Arsenal had great success with Rice and Trossard. Like they basically, from the day that they started playing, they fit into the squad. There was no adaptation period. And when the league is becoming closer and closer, like we see it nowadays, from fourth to 10th, like the lack of that adaptation period could be very valuable for these teams. So they might, try and look indoors, like, or indoors is a bad way to put it, domestically is better. But like, like you mentioned Mbeumo for Liverpool or things like that. Yeah, Brentford have an abundance of talent. And another thing with Brentford is they have a very talented manager. And the way that these clubs are churning through managers, it's only a matter of time till people like Iraola and Frank are also picked off. I think the most interesting club, though, for next year in the transfer window that's not a traditional Big Six club is definitely Newcastle. Because if they don't make Champions League football, they have a number of, borderline, if not already world-class players. In my eyes, Isak is the best striker in the league. I take him over Haaland because of his ability to create, at a really, really high level. Um, and, Bruno Guimaraes is also a quality player. Lewis Hall might be the best left back in the Premier League this year in terms of his performances. And if they don't make the Champions League, at least one of these players is gonna want to leave. Like these guys are approaching their prime, specifically Isaac and Guimaraes. And while they may love the club that they're at, if they aren't in the Champions League, if they're at a club that can't, qualify, it really might be time for them to move on. And I know a lot of Newcastle fans will be happy to hear something like that. But, like if you guys do qualify for the Champions League, I don't see them moving because it would take an unbelievable amount of money to get them out. And I don't think people would be willing to pay that. Um, so it's going to be, I think there's going to be a lot of movement. Like, unlike January, where it felt like it was really just City who made a majority of the business, I think it's going to be a big amount of business, and not necessarily that it's going to be, 100 million pound moves every other day, but there's going to be a lot of business, and I think there's going to be business between the Premier League clubs a lot, which is going to be interesting. And like It's going to be cool to see how these deals are priced, because there's the traditional, English bias or, English tax or, not wanting to sell to a rival. So it's going to be interesting. And, I think what we're gonna see next year as well is we're gonna see because of the amount of players these teams have to recruit, we're gonna see them taking more gambles, on more raw younger players, maybe with the physical qualities they like, but maybe not with the tactical or technical ability yet that they'd want.
Mm. And you forgot to add the label Mighty Newcastle United ahead of. I've started to call them this after they won the Carabao Cup against Liverpool. But yeah, even at Brighton, I remember this. Their right back, although he faced a lot of injuries, his name was Tariq Lamptey. I was a big fan of him. Like his pace was super. He was like a daydream for like all the FIFA players of like how they wanted like the FIFA 16 Gareth Bale of how he used to run down the wings. Tariq Lamptey just used to do it in real football instead of FIFA. But there's all these players that you've named within like Brighton and Bournemouth. Even like I'm a big fan of Van Hecke as well, who started with Van Dijk for Netherlands against Spain. Although they did concede 3 goals, but there's all these players who will be targeted by the top six, the major six known football clubs within England. But yeah, I've been hearing a lot about Dean Huijsen. You said his name in the previous episode, and I didn't know much about him. I had seen him play, but I've been reading about him, and I've seen his clips of his season. He's just 19. He's 6'6", and he just made his debut for Spain. And I was talking with my friend, one of my closest friends over here. He's from the Netherlands. He saw his name. He was like, Huijsen, how is he playing for Spain? Like that seems such a Dutch name for. And then when I went into his history, so he's represented the Netherlands at almost every age level competition that you see. Netherlands under 16, under 19. But then he switched over to Spain, I believe, in the under 21 categories, and now he's made his debut for Spain. But he's been on the books or on the lookout or on every scout's book that we know, and all the major clubs within Europe have been, because like one of the things is if we just talk about Real Madrid, so they've had this crisis in their center back positioning. They do have Eder Militao, who was their last signing, I believe, in the centre back role. And except for him, they have Rudiger, and they also have other options. But they've been facing this centre back issue for this season, as well as I believe last season as well. They had some sort of issue in that role. But if they do bring in someone like Dean Huijsen, who's only 19, he probably has 15 years ahead of him to give his service to the club. It could be a major signing for a club such as Real Madrid, because then they'll know that there's this guy who has a proven track record within the Premier League, which, according to me, once again, is better than La Liga. And there's a proven track record of this guy playing in the Premier League, and he could be like someone who's uh, like a puzzle solver, or we'll say like he'll guarantee them that they have this player along with Rudiger and Militao and the others uh, who will be always there within the next decade. So that is a long-term plan for a club like Real Madrid, I believe, with these players.
Yeah, I think it's the type of signing Real Madrid does make. We saw them put a lot of money on Tchouaméni when he was still young. We saw them do this with Endrick. We've seen them do that with Camavinga. They like when they have, a good core of players in their prime, they always tend to stack players underneath that are going to be the next. And they don't mind spending a lot to do that. And yeah, I mean, for Huijsen for being playing for Spain, I think it makes sense given Netherlands are very blessed in the center back department. They have a lot of center backs, so and Spain doesn't really have the same level of talent in that position. So yeah, it does make sense. It's a smart decision by him to play for Spain. But yeah, but I've heard a lot of rumors about Saliba to Real Madrid. And as much as I hate to say it, that does make sense in terms of what they would want. His age bracket, he's 22. Um, but yeah, I think the positive about signing Huijsen instead is he would be significantly cheaper. He's, I think, 3 years younger. and
I
you
think
could
he's
bet
got
it.
a he's gotten a release clause, probably 40 million or 50 million pounds, if I recall
Yeah,
correctly. That's his release clause with Bournemouth.
yeah, something around there. Saliba would probably cost near 100 million, which would be, significantly more. And there's still Rudiger still has, a lot of fuel left in him. And Militao has some time. So, signing a younger someone, Saliba sitting on, on the bench would not make sense. So Hoyson, could be, a player that gets, rotation minutes, sits on the bench a little bit, and they could eventually bet him in and to be the number one, right? But, being younger, you get that advantage, and being cheaper, you get the, ability to invest in other positions, or also the protection against, if it doesn't work out, it's, it was much less money. Um, yeah, I think what will be interesting is, yeah, I think so there'll be a lot of competition for those youngsters. But yeah, like I hope that however, like the clubs in La Liga, towards the middle of the table in Serie A as well, can, work towards keeping their players, better if they're like with the financial situations getting slightly better. I know they were pretty bad in Serie A for a while because we see a lot of this young talent from these, mid-table clubs go to mid-table Premier League clubs. And in my opinion, like it's a lateral move. Even if the Premier League is theoretically a better league, like those clubs should be able to hold on to players if they want to. I don't like seeing them being financially, bullied. And yeah, I mean but what it has done is made the Premier League very strong. As we said last episode, it's crazy to think that Real Madrid are going to be looking at Bournemouth for their next star center back. I mean, if you said that a couple of years ago, everyone would call you a lunatic, right? Like the fact of the matter is the best young talent in the world now, it gets poached from all over and comes to the Premier League, and Real Madrid's the people who buy finished products, right? So, or not finished products, but not completely raw players, and you find a lot of those in the Premier League, whether it be, defenders like Hoyson, midfielders like Baleba, attackers like you know Saka or Nwaneri now. These types of talents are, becoming commonplace in the Premier League.
Yep. So now do you want to head towards our side of the continent in terms of the news?
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about the Farmers League.
Why do you want to talk about League One? The North
Oh
American
no,
football is
I
so much
meant the
better.
I meant the MLS, but yeah.
Okay, so MLS just got its first sacking of the season when Montreal CF's coach Courtois. That's a nice name to have. Laurent Courtois. Montreal had lost four of their first five matches, and they drew just one, and they're last in the Eastern Conference, just better than Toronto, who's now the second worst in the Eastern Conference. So Toronto has been making moves, and now they're not the worst. So I believe you live in Toronto, so you can go to watch their match because they're not the bottom of the league at least.
Uh,
And also, I came across the stat that Toronto's Insigne, I believe he's only second to Messi in terms of his wages. Messi is earning around close to 16 million, while Insigne is close to 12 million, which was astounding to me with like Toronto with their placing this season. I'm not sure how they performed the previous season. I'm not a I've only started to watch MLS after I moved here to
I
Canada.
think he's not playing right now.
Yeah, he's not playing right now, but with
Yeah.
his wages, that's like crazy with him being second to only
Yeah.
Messi in this whole
I
league.
think the problem when we signed him is I think he was 29, turning 30, and he was in his prime. He's one of the better wingers in Europe. So you have to overpay to get that
Yep.
type of talent to the MLS, and we did. And I don't think the fans are very happy right now about the Insigne situation. But I mean, if we're talking about if you pay off talent, yeah, I'd say sure. He still is one of the better players in the league, but if he's not gonna play, like, what's the point? So I
What's the
don't know.
point of paying 12 million? So if you
Yeah,
come back from the Eastern Conference back to the Western Conference, I I went to watch the match between Vancouver Whitecaps and Chicago Fire. This was probably the first time that Vancouver were hosting a cross conference match this season, but Chicago Fire did come out on top. I would blame it on the fact that Vancouver were missing out on a few players. The right winger who played for Canada, Ali Ahmed, he also plays for the Whitecaps, so he didn't. I believe he didn't come back in time to play the match against Chicago Fire, because they also had to play against the US, which they won. And except for that, I believe even the captain of the Whitecaps, Ryan Gould, he wasn't there, and their main striker, Brian White, he wasn't part of the starting 11. I'm not sure if he was on the subs or not, but he wasn't in the starting 11. So this was the first defeat for Vancouver Whitecaps, although they were on a four-match winning streak within the MLS. If they had gotten the win, they would have become the fourth team to win five consecutive matches in the MLS. But of course, that didn't happen. So, and the fun fact from this match between Vancouver and Chicago was that one of the main midfielders in the Vancouver team, Sebastian Berhalter, and his dad was the coach of Chicago, Berhalter. So there was a lot of rivalry leading up to this match of how the coaching dad was saying that he'll try to outmaneuver or out manipulate his son. Although I believe that he's probably the best midfielder in the Vancouver Whitecaps field. He has an aura which is quite similar to Jordan Henderson. He's like even his playing style is almost exactly like him. I think if he just wore the number 14 shirt instead of the number 16 that he wears, he'll look just like Jordan Henderson. Except for the height, I think Jordan Henderson is like 6 foot. Berhalter would be like 5'8", 5'9", if I've observed correctly. But his playing style is exactly of Jordan Henderson. But yeah, it was a fight between the Berhalters and Chicago, belonging to the father, Greg Berhalter, came out on top.
Yeah, I mean that's good for you, not good for me. Uh, but
But we're
very
still,
interesting storyline.
but we're still number one in our conference.
Yeah. Vancouver look good this year. I mean, it's always a good thing to have. It's a good thing for them to have a lot of Canadian players in the squad, even if they weren't available there today. And it's a good thing, at least from my perspective, that the Canadian organizations play well, whether it's Toronto or Vancouver. I think with Toronto, it's going to be one of those things where it'll take a couple of years for us to rebuild the roster. I think it's not only aging, but it's also not very good. Um, and there's overpaid players, so it'll take a while. In response to going to watch a match, maybe when we're not one of the worst teams in in North America, I'll consider it going again. Or maybe if a good team like the Whitecaps comes in, I'll go watch that game. But yeah, I think it's important, especially with the World Cup coming and us hosting games, that our team is not so bad, so that there's a good level of interest at least in football. But I don't think there'll be a problem in selling those tickets. I'm gonna I'm gonna try my best to get some of them, but it is notoriously hard to get World Cup tickets every around the world, let alone the US. I don't know if you see like concert ticket prices here, but they're insanely bad. So I can only imagine how bad the football ticket prices are gonna be.
Yes, I can recall at the BC Place where they had the Taylor Swift concert in December. So I believe tickets were sold for as much as like $1,500 as well. And people came from Europe to witness the concert. I was talking to some Uber drivers over here, and they told me like a couple came from Germany to attend the Taylor Swift concert, and they had bought like $1,000 tickets. But even on the other
Wow.
hand, I had a friend, and there was also the story done by CBC as well. Like there was a ticket right behind the stage, so you can't see the stage, you can't see Taylor Swift performing. You'll just see her on the screens. But that ticket was sold for like $16, so that was probably the cheapest ticket that led you to BC Place
Yeah.
where the Taylor Swift concert was happening.
Yeah, no, I heard about the Taylor Swift tourism as well. My cousin who lives in Toronto actually flew to Europe. I think maybe it was one of the smaller countries, maybe Hungary or Serbia, and she watched it there because it was actually cheaper for her to fly there, stay there for a few days, watch the concert with her friend in the VIP section, and come back rather than buying a normal ticket in Toronto. So, it was. a funny thing. Hopefully that's not the. I mean, hopefully the World Cup is a bit more affordable for us, and I don't have to break the bank to watch it. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I definitely want to go watch. Hopefully there's an England game in Toronto, so I can go watch Saka or some of the Arsenal boys, play. I've watched a couple Arsenal games, but unfortunately I haven't been able to in the last couple of years since I've been in Toronto. But fingers crossed we get some good games in Toronto from the World Cup.
Vancouver is also scheduled to host 7 matches, which also
Mhm.
includes the quarterfinal as well. And two of the group matches of Canada will be played in Vancouver.
Mm.
So yeah, it's going to be an exciting year next one, 2026, and yeah, I just observed this thing win the MLS. I believe there's only three Canadian teams in it. There's Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. So I believe there's also scope in that thing as well of more Canadian cities coming into the fray. Although I'm not sure if Ottawa would want to come into the MLS. I just visited it last month, and it's not a soccer crazy city at all. But there's always scope of more Canadian cities. Except for ice hockey, there's a lot of things that I could see. There's also the women's NWSL starting next month in April. So there's also that thing. I believe Canada was the only probably second country after I forgot the name of the African country which didn't have a women's soccer league. And finally there's this ex-player Diana Matheson.
Mm.
I also contacted her, but she hasn't replied to me. But hopefully, if we do get her, we'll interview her for this YouTube channel of ours. But yeah, Canada is one of two countries only left in the world which didn't have a women's league, but now from next month onwards, we'll have that as well.
It's a great thing, as an Arsenal fan, I actually do watch a lot of the Arsenal Women's League games in the FAWSL, which is the English one. They're very successful. I mean, I take pride in the fact that they're the only British women's team to win the Women's Champions League. And yeah, no, I think women's football in particular is very fun to watch. It's actually a very different game. Um, and I think there's sometimes when you watch the men's game and get bored by the lack of ability to make individual moments because of the way things are coached nowadays with like the Guardiola systems, etc. When you watch the women's game, I feel as if there's more room for that. So at times it can be, as exciting, if not more exciting. And Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing for Canada to do this. And, it's going to make Canada even more competitive on the international stage in terms of their players, the women's national team, So it's a great thing. And I'm glad that it's happening.
Oh well, that's all from us. So if you did like the video, do give a like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be waiting for your comments to let us know what we can improve on and what more can we add to our episodes. But this was all that we observed during this week, and the main news that we had. So this was the international break, but now we'll head back towards club football, which is liked by me more, and hopefully Arsenal are 12 points behind, but I hope till the time we record the next episode, they'll still be 12 points behind, and we'll be at least a foot inside winning another Premier League title.